there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate.
Hello and welcome, I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching Trending Tech on NewsX World. Here we bring you the latest tech breakthroughs, trends and gadgets from around the world. Now, Australia has implemented a ban on social media for children under 16, aimed at protecting youngsters from harmful content and algorithms that exploit their vulnerabilities. The move has been lauded by parents and child welfare groups alike, while drawing criticism from tech companies and free speech advocates. Meanwhile, the Australian government says these unprecedented measures are needed to protect children from predatory algorithms, filling phone screens with bullying and violence. The decision has sparked global debate, with other countries watching closely. Now, Switzerland's interior minister has stated that she is open to considering a similar ban, and UK officials are also reportedly reviewing measures to limit children's exposure to social media. These governments are focusing on safety, content restrictions, and the responsibility of platforms to protect young users, signaling a growing international trend towards regulating children's online activity. To talk about this further, joining us now is Parnell Palm McGuinness, she is an insights and advocacy strategist for policy change campaigns and also a senior fellow at the Center for Independent Studies. She's worked on policy and communications for political parties in Germany and Australia and runs influential campaigns on topics ranging from school choice through to productivity reforms. She's also a non-executive director and chair of the Risk and Compliance Committee for an educational institution and serves on the advisory board of Australians for Prosperity. She also in fact writes a weekly column on politics and culture in the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Thank you very much, Parnell, for joining me in this discussion. Now I'll like to begin by asking you my first question. First of all, once again, thanks for taking time to speak to us.
Great pleasure. A great pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Firstly, what prompted Australia to implement the social media ban for children under 16? What do you think was some of the key concerns that were raised? Was it to prevent radicalization? Was it the concern of the use of dark web, for narcotics trade and other illicit activities? Or do you think some of these concerns would have weighed in greatly in Australia implementing the ban?
The real drivers behind this ban were concerns around cyberbullying and also the mental health of young people, and of course also online predators. So it's about the fact that we've seen mental health in young people decline considerably ever since social media has been introduced. And so in looking for a solution to that, the government, there have been a lot of intellectuals writing about this in the US. Jonathan Haidt has written a really great book about this, sort of tracking what happens when young people spend time online instead of in the real world interacting with their peers, and the decline in mental health and social skills as a result of that, but also, of course, the exposure to online predators of young people without the supervision of adults or without even the protections of, a community around them, because when you're online, you are, of course, all by yourself online. So those things together created the pressure on government to do something. And the Australian government, I think, felt that very strongly, because about 75% of Australian teens between 13 and 17 use social media daily. And the average age that they're getting their first accounts is quite young. I'm not sure if it's young by global standards, but certainly to my mind, between 11 and 12 years, that's a young age to be getting a social media platform. And so with those mental health issues, that's why they've decided to go ahead with this solution.
Parnal, also, how do you think, how effective, as per experts, will the ban be in protecting children from harmful content, from cyberbullying and other concerns that you've just talked about?
Well, that's another matter. The effectiveness of the ban is likely not to be as good as the government hopes. And that is largely because it relies on the platforms to implement these bans. Now, we know that the platforms have an awful lot of information in terms about all of us who use them, through the algorithms they use. So they can even tell what your emotional state is when you're using these platforms. But they, of course, don't want to shut down children, not really, because this is how they bring people into a lifelong sort of commitment to using their social platforms and all of the things that entails. They usually will move them through a different life cycle of product. It, of course, exposes them to the children to advertising. We all get caught into this sort of vortex of social media as our primary place of getting our news, interacting with people and buying things. So the social media platforms don't want to turn it down, don't want to shut things down. The government, therefore, has backed off a bit. The Australian government has said that really their measure of success will be if this ban sparks conversations between parents and their children. Now, of course, the problem with that, just in a bigger sense, is that these are the conversations that parents should already have been having with their children. So I'm concerned a bit that when you get government moving into spaces like this, that it disempowers parents and disempowers the family, because it says that in order to have an effective parental sort of conversation with your child, you need it to be reinforced by government. The government has a role in the family. But that's another matter, So the question, to your question on whether they can whether they can implement it effectively, I suspect they could if they wanted to, but they won't.
Parnal, how also do you think will authorities monitor compliance without overreaching into family privacy or over-policing internet usage? And also, how do you think enforcement can be ensured?
Well, they have suggested that there might be different ways of doing this, but nobody really knows how they're going to go about doing it. So one of the suggestions has been that children might have to do face scans to confirm that they are the age that they say they are. But of course, as we know, facial scans can be very inaccurate and they are very intrusive. So the child would then be giving their facial data into this platform, which we already are saying has a lot of concerns with it. So there is another method that people have floated, but of course, as I say, the companies are very protective of their algorithm, but a company should be able to see what age the people browsing on there are roughly, because we know that, as I said, they can even tell our emotional state. They have enough data to estimate an age range within a fairly narrow bracket. So again, they should be able to do these things, but they will probably choose not to. They will choose to make it as hard as possible and as intrusive as possible, so that there is a high threshold to enforcing this. That is, again, it's going to come back to the Australian government has realised all of these problems and is saying this is why this is about families getting the confidence to talk about it rather than not I mean, just a little anecdote. In my household, my son turns out he'd already set the age on the platform to 25. And I know a lot of other children have done that as well. And all of a sudden, of course, that puts them out of the ban bracket. So it comes down to the parents to enforce it, not the platform.
Would you also say that this ban could have unintended consequences, such as pushing children to unregulated platforms or VPNs? Also, do you think it's going to affect with innovation or stifle their creativity?
I think it will push them to VPNs and that they will try all of these things. And of course, the danger is that what we're doing when we're doing this is we're creating a two-tier system, because some children will be kept off it because they're under 16, which means that the platforms will have the right to, by default, assume that anybody on them is over 16 and advertise accordingly. So that could get dangerous. Yes, VPNs are always going to be used by tech-savvy children. Again, it depends on how tech-savvy the parents are in blocking VPNs on devices and, working around things like that. And of course, when the spaces are assumed to be used by adults, then there are going to be fewer gateways on them. So the spaces that the children then do find themselves in could be made more dangerous as a result of this ban.
And what balance should be struck really between child protection and free speech or digital rights?
Well, I'm all for child protection. Child protection is extremely important because, as we know, we don't let children do a whole lot of things which can harm them. They have immature brains, and we as parents have the responsibility to ensure that they are protected and guided, and sometimes also explain to them that even though they might not like a particular rule, that rule is good for them in the long term. We're here to make happy adults, not happy children. So enforcing this is going to be about the parents, but I think that as parents and as the Australian government and other governments around the world can turn to the platforms again and say, look, we know that you have the ability to enforce this in a better way than you currently are, and we are going to get serious about levying fines on you if you don't. So the Australian system is currently that there will be a large fine on tech platforms who are found not to be compliant. But so far we haven't seen anything. The ban is still new. So far we haven't seen anything of that. The government claims that many accounts have been shut down. We don't know, if that is going to continue, if those were shut down by parents or the platform, and we don't know, whether the platforms are really going to continue to do this, or whether whether they'll find a new way to say we're going to be intrusive, so that adults will start backing off and saying it's not worth it to protect kids if we have to give up some more of our information.
And with countries like Switzerland and the UK also now considering similar measures, do you see this as a start of a global trend in regulating children's social media use?
Look, I really hope it is, in a way, because it is important to protect children from these spaces which can be extremely dangerous and also simply which can hack the brain in a way that's very unhealthy. But I think that if we're going to see this happen globally, then it will be as a result of governments around the world getting together and saying, together we have the pressure on these tech companies to force them to make an effective solution for keeping underage children off the platforms. So we can do that by, as I was saying, by using the algorithm, the strength of the algorithm, to unlock who they're talking to and to ensure that the wrong people aren't on there. Potentially, though, we should be broadening this out a little bit further and saying the algorithms are currently opaque and potentially corrosive to people who are above 16 as well. So maybe we need to be challenging these companies to not use the algorithm or to let people opt in or opt out of the algorithm.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for now, Pam, for Parnell, for joining me in this discussion and speaking to us in detail here at Trending Tech. And with that, viewers, it's a wrap on this episode of the Trending Tech. For more tech updates and innovations, stay tuned to NewsX World.